You know, they say that you will never regret the things you didn't do. Well, as an older person with ADHD, there are 5 specific things that I did for myself throughout this entire journey, both pre and post diagnosis, that I will never regret. It was in some cases hard, in some cases it was a long journey, but I will never regret making the following choices and decisions about my life as it relates to my diagnosis. And I hope that in sharing these, I can inspire some of you, whether you're an older adult like me or just a young pup, to make not necessarily the same decisions, but to really think about these things because they do have a massive impact on the quality of your life. And of course, if you're new here, my name is Kara McGill. I'm an ADHD coach and creator, and I am here for the busy, ambitious brains who want to have a good quality of life. So let's just get right into it. The first thing I did that I will never regret was actually get a diagnosis. And that took time and research, and it was a pain in the butt because it happened during the Rona. But I am so glad that I got my diagnosis, and not because I needed a label, but what I needed was a framework. I needed to not be guessing around what was going on with me and how I could best support myself, because at the time, I thought I was losing my mind. So what I really needed was validation that I wasn't losing my mind and a path forward that I could take, steps to follow to actually get myself resourced and functioning like a normal human being again. And I talk to a lot of clients these days who are self-diagnosed, and I don't think that's necessarily a problem. I think if you identify with the symptoms, that is the first step in your diagnosis journey, but I don't think it should end there. I know that for some people, it can be expensive. For other folks, there can be a very long wait. And for others, maybe you've already spoken to a healthcare professional, but not the right one, and maybe you were dismissed because you look to be too functional to have ADHD. In any of those circumstances, put your name on the wait list and find yourself a second opinion. And if money is a barrier, research ways to get around that. If you don't have health insurance or if it doesn't cover it, look for ways to find lower cost providers. Don't just give up. Now with ChatGPT, we have a world of resources at our fingertips, and that costs nothing to do the research. So my takeaway for any of you who are currently thinking that you have it, but you haven't formally been diagnosed, it really does make the difference to get a formal diagnosis because you know what you're dealing with. And I've said this before, ADHD rarely travels alone. So you may find that you're dealing with more than just ADHD or something entirely different. It is definitely worth it to know. The next thing I will never regret is trying ADHD medication. I know this is not the route for everyone, but for me, it made a considerable difference. And I get a lot of questions around this. I don't talk about the medications that I'm on because that's not important. There's a variety of different options out there. I tried at least 3 or 4 different medications before I found the right one for me. So that's something that you're going to have to do for yourself. Now, in terms of medication, the pill is not the skill. And what that means is just because you're taking medication doesn't mean that all of a sudden you're going to gain all these executive functions. You've really got to start from square one and build up where your weaknesses are. But what the medication does is give you the focus and energy and determination to work on it and actually gain the skills. It is night and day difference for me. For some people, it is not like that at all. But in my opinion, it was absolutely worth trying. And it does make a huge difference in my quality of life day after day. The next thing I've done, which has been a long journey, long before I got diagnosed, and it will continue until the day I die, is treating personal growth like it's my full-time job. I struggled really early on as a child into preteen, and it really wasn't until I hit my 20s that I hit a stride in terms of growing up, making better decisions, treating myself better, and just generally adulting, if we will. And I have a lot of compassion for that earlier person because she didn't know what she was dealing with and she didn't have the tools. But once I got into my 20s and I really started to mature, I looked at personal growth as something that I knew I needed to focus on and make a priority in my life. And all credit to that earlier version of myself because I have stuck with it. And that means that I have always been curious about self-help books and spirituality and psychology. I have an undergrad in psych. I have a master's degree in psych. It has always been something that I've been fascinated in, not just because the science of it is so interesting, but also because I knew I needed a lot of healing. And that journey has taken me down a lot of different roads, some stranger than others. But all of it has culminated into who I am today. And while I have pretty much read every self-help book under the sun and done all the yoga teacher trainings and the meditation retreats and all those things. I can't say that one specifically has been the thing that moved the dial the most. I really think just having an ongoing curiosity about personal growth, personal development, spiritual growth has given me the curiosity, the self-compassion, and the tools to rewrite my personal narrative, which, if I'm being honest, was pretty crappy when I was a kid. And I don't think I'd be near the person I am today had I not taken that interest early on. So I don't think you're ever too early or too late to take your own personal growth seriously, however that looks for you. Now we have AI, which I think is a great tool for personal growth, and I will make a video about that if you guys want me to. I use it daily to help me manage looping thoughts, negative thoughts, help me process things that are happening in my life and in my relationships. And it's been super helpful. So personal growth and treating it like my full-time job has been probably the most important thing overall. And really, that doesn't have to cost you anything. Information in this day and age is totally free. You just have to have the willingness to have an open mind, try things, and see where it takes you. That's literally it. Okay, the next thing I do not regret, which is post-diagnosis, speaking as a woman in middle age. And this has to do with relationships. I think a lot of ADHDers struggle with relationships, not just because, sometimes we can be too much, we overthink, we overgive, we overcomplicate, all of those sort of things. But also, I think that a lot of us are working from a place of believing that we need to try extra hard to be worthy of people's friendships. I don't know if I'm the only one who feels that way, but it has been my modus operandi from a very young age. And I've got a lot of trauma around friendships and things that have happened to me throughout my past that I've had to work through. And as a result, I have not always felt safe as it relates to friendships, relationships in general. So it's something that I've had to work on. And I think I've done a decent job of that, but coming into my 50s has been like a whole next level experience with relationships in general. And what I'm coming to learn as an older person is that I don't have time for chaos anymore. When we're all in our 20s and our friends are making dumb decisions and we're making dumb decisions, that's just part of life. You're young and you're trying to figure things out. That no longer applies when you're in your 50s. So as I've gotten older and as my friends have gotten older, if I notice that certain people just bring chaos with them, no matter how old they get or how mature they are, then I know that that is probably not going to be a good relationship to have in my life. And as someone who's very conflict avoidant, it's not like I'm saying to people, you're chaotic, I don't want you in my life anymore. But I just generally tend to notice when I hear from people only when, there's tragedy or trauma or something chaotic going on in their life and they constantly kind of need help or just emotional support. And knowing myself that I don't have very good boundaries with that because I'm dealing with that sort of core wound of always having to work extra hard to be in relationship with people, I've noticed that my MO is to jump in and fix. And when I really care about someone, I take on a cognitive and emotional load of worrying about them all the time, especially when they're out there making chaotic decisions. So I've just noticed for myself that I have had to create more space around people that are chaotic to protect my own peace. I am much more careful about the people I choose to have around me now. I would much rather have fewer friends that I constantly feel safe to be myself around than having a bigger social group that drains my energy. So I do not regret learning about myself, learning about this core wound that I have, and understanding my role in friendship. So I am not saying that other people are bad. I am not saying I am bad. But what I have learned is that there are certain friendships that are good for me, and there are certain friendships that are not. And I've become much more skilled at identifying which ones those are. So understanding and learning that has made all of the difference in my own confidence as it relates to relationships, especially in my 50s. And I am learning so much more about who I am, my own patterns and stories. And it has been quite the fascinating ride, I must say. And the last thing that I am so grateful to myself that I took this on and I will never regret it. And that is learning about personal finance at a very early age. Like back when I was broke as a joke, I had a lot of student loan debt. I had no money. I knew all of the ATMs in my neighborhood that would distribute cash in $10 bills because I rarely had more than 20 in my account. So I know what it's like to have absolutely nothing, or actually less than nothing. But somehow in my early 20s, I had the wherewithal, and I don't know where this came from, to start taking personal finance seriously. And this was after destroying my own credit rating by not taking personal finance seriously. I just knew that if I wanted to feel safe in my life and have the freedom that I needed and the optionality that I needed to treat myself with kindness, and I don't mean treat myself as in buy myself things, but treat myself as in have the option to leave a job or a relationship or a situation that was not safe or not good for me, right? Like having optionality in terms of finances is one of the highest forms of self-care that you can give yourself. Now, I know that this might be triggery for some because we're all starting from different financial situations and having different opportunities. And also, folks with ADHD who have a tendency to be impulsive can have a very bad relationship with money. And again, I was one of those people. But for some reason, I had this very early inclination in my mid 20s to start paying attention to finances. And I am horrible at math, horrible at math. But personal finance is not math. It's about making decisions about what you do with your money. And I started to realize that money coming in didn't necessarily have to go out the door the next day. I could put a little bit away and start being more aggressive about paying off my loans. And that attitude shift made all the difference. And thank God it did, because in my early 30s, I did come into a little bit of money. I was working for a tech company at the time. This was early 2000s. And I got a stock grant that enabled me to pay off my student loans, put a down payment on the house, and put the rest of it in savings. The only thing I bought myself was a sewing machine, random thing, but I did not spend it all. And earlier me would have, because I'd never had that kind of money before. And doing that gave me such a sense of freedom and empowerment. And the more and more I learned, the better decisions I made. And I was far from perfect with money. But you have to remember, I started with a very dysfunctional relationship with money. So that journey was extra long for me. And it wasn't until 2017, so I was 47 at this point, listening to a podcast between Tim Ferriss and Mr. Money Mustache that completely changed the next 10 years of my life, because I went from being interested in money and definitely investing here and there and, doing my 401k matches and my RSP matches when I lived in Canada, to all of a sudden being aware that early retirement was a thing. And that was the next level of optionality for me. And just for the next, it's been 8 years since I listened to that podcast. For the next 8 years, I went gangbusters, changing more and more about my life to squirrel away enough money so that I could retire early. Because at that point, being in corporate was very taxing for my ADHD. And I knew the sooner I was in a position to make work optional, the happier and more regulated I would be. And that has definitely been the case. It has not been easy, but I'm so much happier for it. So I share that, hoping to encourage some of you who think that you have a bad relationship with money now, no matter what your age is, to start learning about finance. I'm by no means an expert, so I won't be telling you anything about it, but I can recommend 2 books to start. If you're here in the US, The Simple Path to Wealth by J.D. Collins. And if you're in Canada, Quit Like a Millionaire is also a great book and more geared towards the Canadian financial markets. Those 2 books are both based in story, not technical jargon, but it'll also give you a framework to start setting yourself on a path towards more financial security, if not freedom, in the future. So those are the 5 things in my life that I will never regret, especially as it relates to my ADHD, because it has supported me in this journey so much. And I hope that by sharing this personal experience, I give you some insights to think about what will support you in your own journey, because I want that for all of us. So on that note, thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.